Okay, good morning. It's good to be here in such a beautiful venue. It's really nice here. So I'm going to talk you through the evolution of ITV's live streaming platform. There's a lot of diagrams here, so I hope you're happy with diagrams. So I'll give you a quick intro, and then we'll look at the first version of the live streaming platform. Then we rebuilt that platform, some failure scenarios it went through to see how resilient it was, and then enabling enhanced resilience with disaster recovery. Then a little bit about server-side ad insertion, and finally, the use of SCTI messaging within ITV. So all 6 ITV linear channels are streamed to the hub, and the hub is the ITV app for OTT, and that's available on a wide range of devices, and it grows and grows, so it's a very popular app. We are moving to server-side ad insertion now. Previously, we've been on client-side, which is fine, but with the problem with ad blockers and the extra work that the client has to do to the ad swapping, moving to server-side brings a lot of advantages. The streaming platform also drives other services. One in particular is a very high bit rate, 100 megabit per second, cloud-based live-to-VOD service, and this creates catch-up assets from our live content, and it's very important to get those on various VOD platforms as soon as possible after linear transmission ends, because you can monetize it, and the more eyeballs that see that, the more ad revenue ITV gets. We also drive high-profile live streams of events. Typically, these are major sporting events, but last year was quite an interesting one. We had the Royal Wedding, which was really intense in terms of what we did in live streams. Most streams have SCTI 35 signaling. I'll touch upon this a bit later, but this really is a big focus for me at ITV, is to enhance how we mark up the content so we can deliver new services. Also, ultra-high definition, that is also quite current for us. At the moment, I'm looking at how we can create mezzanine UHD so we can interoperate with partners and distribute UHD to those partners over IP, which is quite an interesting topic. So let's look at the very first version of the live streaming platform. So here it is. So ITV's got 2 playout centers and 2 data centers, so it's all a distributed estate. We've got the 6 channels I mentioned, the linear channels, and they're spread over 2 of the playout centers. So we've got 4 in the playout 1 site and 2 in the second playout site. And we have to send, or we had at that point, had to send the 2 channels from the other playout center over an ITV network into the main site. And you can see it's a single site that carries all the encoders. So if that site had failures, we'd lose all our streams, so not the best of options. But we did have full one-for-one redundancy. So here we show that as red and blue paths. So one-for-one is expensive, of course, because you're doubling everything, but it does give you a lot of reliability. The initial platform also had active-passive streams. So one stream, the red stream, would be active. The blue stream would be ready, but not actually switched to service. So again, a manual switchover isn't the best way to handle that. And a single path to the CDN. So a single site and a single path does give obvious risks for service loss. So if you lose the path to the CDN, then you've lost everything. And if you lose the single site, again, you lose everything. And live streaming now for ITV, and I think for most broadcasters, is such an important aspect that it really has to be treated differently. And we have to move to broadcast levels of resilience. And that's what we did. So we've rebuilt the platform. So the objectives of the rebuild, we had quite a hard target. There was a major sporting event that we had to have the new platform in place for. We had to make the ad replacement more reliable because we want to monetize these events. And it was an opportunity to improve the stream quality as we got new encoders with new technology. The actual algorithms to make the stream quality better was optional for us to use, so that was something we wanted to do. And of course, greater resilience, as I mentioned, the previous site was not as resilient as it could have been. So this is what we ended up with. It's a multi-site distributed platform. So we've got new encoders, and now you can see they're all sites. So the data centers and the playout centers all have stream encoders. And we selected AWS Elemental for this. Obviously, Elemental have got a very good reputation in live streaming, and we know them very well. They had a very interesting roadmap for us, and they've always been very amenable to taking feature requests to add new services to their core software. So what we do is, at the playout site, we encode mezzanine streams, and these are transport streams, MPEG-2, 25 megabits for high definition and 15 megabits for standard definition, and they carry across to the data centers where we have the transcoders, and they take the mezzanines and they transcode that to device formats for our partners. And also from the data center, we distribute mezzanine out to broadcast partners as well with 25 megabits or 15 megabits. So it's a distributed model. So we're separating encode from transcode, and that sort of mimics the linear model, where you have an encoder feeding a multiplexer, and that kind of separation is quite good. It enables fault tolerance, so that was another good feature that we put in place for this. Again, we've got one for one, so everything's fully redundant, red and blue networks. So we have red and blue playout, and we have red-blue data centers. And the key to it all is the multicast network. So the transport streams from the contribution side, they're all multicast. So they flow naturally across our entire network, so you can pick them up at any location, and that really helps with fault recovery. So now we see we've got all channels at both data centers, so all 6 channels at data centers, which is it's a much better world to be in, because in failure mode, either data center can take the traffic. Not shown here, but quite important, is pathways to AWS. We do quite a lot of file-based transcoding in AWS, as Kevin mentioned, but we also are looking at streaming within AWS as well. And of course, other clouds are available, but we tend to use AWS. And we've got 2 10-gig direct connects from each data center into AWS, so we extend that resilient model. So we've gone from really a fragile initial platform to one that's distributed and really highly resilient. So what were the results of that re-architecture? So it did indeed tick all these boxes. So it was ready for the sporting event, ad replacement worked well, the stream quality did get an uplift, and we had substantially better resilience. But we also noticed we had far fewer switchovers between encoders. And these were, in the previous system, these were manually done, as I mentioned, to recover. Now it's more automated. And multicast, as I mentioned, just the nature of multicast means it's so easy to pick up this content. And the elementals, because they were more powerful, they're a new generation of encoders, we could put new services onto these encoders as well as hub streams. Typically, the 100 megabit streams I mentioned earlier sit quite easily on these new encoders. But most importantly, it was really highly resilient, and that was the main goal. And that was largely achieved by this full one-for-one redundancy. And it is very expensive because you're paying twice, but you're getting a real guarantee of service. And for ITV, that was worth the cost. So let's look at some failure scenarios, so more of the same diagrams. So if we look at the loss of a red path from the playout center, so you can see the red line is dashed, but that doesn't matter, the blue path is there, so that service is maintained. And it's maintained because we have input switching on the transcoders at the data center. So the red and blue streams are being constantly decoded at the transcoder. So if you do lose one, it just instantly switches. And because it's dual decoded, so there's no decode pipeline to activate when you switch over, it's actually frame accurate and it switches really on that frame. So if data center 2 fails, then that's not an issue either, because the mesh network, the red data center, just takes the traffic. But if playout center 2 fails in this instance, then you've knocked a hole in your streams. So all the way to the hub, you've lost those 2 channels from that playout center. So obviously that's not a good place to be. Yeah, and definitely not acceptable for a modern OTT service to lose some of your channels. So how do we fix that? Well, we enabled disaster recovery. So here now we see on the playout side, we've got all 6 channels at both locations, and this is enabled by the linear transmission reserve feeds that are used for satellite and DTT. So they are now connected into this platform as well. So if playout 2 now fails, it doesn't matter at all because the playout 1 is carrying all channels, and that does maintain the service. And if data center 1 fails, then it's an amazing disaster to have if half of your systems fail. But because of the architecture, service is also maintained, so we can lose half of our entire infrastructure, and the streams still flow. And that really is close to linear broadcast resilience, which was the entire goal. So a quick look at server-side ad insertion, because that was a topic of interest. Here's the big picture. So we start with the distribution side that I explained earlier, and that's distributing, in this case, Microsoft Smooth Streams. And Smooth Streams is quite a loose spec, but the SCTI-35s that, of course, drive ad replacement are carried in SCTI-35 messages, and they're carried in the sparse track of the smooth stream. And there's quite a lot of work to get that actually correctly operational. There's some, I say it's quite a loose spec, so interpretations between vendors are different, but we've finally got that all aligned. So we now use 2 third-party origins, again with the same red, blue, or AB resilience, and they apply packaging and protection. And we package to HLS and Dash, and we protect with Widevine, PlayReady, and FairPlay, so we cover all the major devices. So when the ITV Hub starts up, the first thing it does is call an ITV playlist service to get the endpoints to actually pick up the streams. And we have a number of alternatives that player can be directed to. First of all is the DAR, the dynamic ad replacement path, and that does enable ad insertion, and there's an AB path around that. And there's also 2 other non-dynamic ad replacement endpoints, and we have those in case we don't need to replace ads, or if there's maintenance on the ad replacement platform, or indeed if there's failure. If the green path fails, for example, we have to fall back to something, and the non-DAR path accommodates that. And the content is served off the origins, but they're not directly accessible to the player. It's all proxied by the CDN, of course, for security. Another important thing is how to make this super resilient as well. So the origin health by the third party is exposed by an API, and ITV systems read the API, and they decide, is origin A fully active? Is origin B active? And if B is at 50% reliability, we don't send content to that origin. And of course, the manifest manipulation is the key to all this targeted advertising, so we can put the demographic and user data in the manifest to enable the ad server to make sense of that and serve the right adverts. So let's finish off looking at the ITV use of SCTI messaging. So ad replacement, as mentioned, that's a well-understood process, and we use SCTI-35 splice inserts, although we're also looking at an alternative way to deliver this ad replacement messaging, and that can be through SCTI-35 time signals. That's quite interesting for us, so we need to know if there's benefits to move off splice inserts, because they're essentially bulletproof, and they've been running for decades, so it's a tried and trusted system. And ITV are also members of the DVB targeted advertising group, and I'm the rep on that particular initiative for ITV. And although that's more aimed to do targeted advertising on linear transmission, right now OTT is out of scope of that work, but at some point there might be some learnings to feed back into how we can use the technologies that we're planning for linear advertising replacement into OTT. Another very current use case for SCTI for us at the moment is identifying the start point for a start again service. So when you're watching a live stream or you miss the start, you want to go back to the start of the program to watch it in its entirety. But how do you do that? So the start point itself can vary by platform, depending on rights. So one platform may not have the rights to go straight to the program. They have to go to the preceding ad break. So you're forcing your viewers to watch a commercial break and then go to the content. But how we enable this would be to use, again, a SCTI-35 message, this time a segmentation descriptor, and that will give unique IDs to let the platform know where to seek back to for the start point. Automated content editing. So an example of this is the 100 meg live to VOD service. So right now there's a little manual step in that process that the linear ad breaks are marked out. So by putting, again, segmentation descriptors in the stream, you can automate that closure of an ad break. Another more conceptual idea is platform-based content replacement. And this becomes more relevant if you're watching a stream channel and that platform doesn't have the rights for that program. You typically see a slate saying content not available on this platform. And that's quite a rough deal for the user. They don't want to see a slate, and it could be for 30 minutes or an hour program. So it's possible to mark up, again with SCTI-35 messages, to say, here are the rights for this program, and if it's not enabled on your platform, you could then replace it with something that at least keeps the service alive rather than having a slate. And so, to wrap up, here's a bit more bits and bytes about how we do this. So on the left is a BXF schedule, the broadcast exchange format, and that drives our playout, and many other broadcasters use that. It's a big XML file. It's actually a huge XML file that covers every aspect of the day's schedule, from each spot in a break, each sponsorship. Everything is marked up in here. So you see in yellow at the top, there's a unique ID actually in the schedule created by ITV, and that's globally unique across all ITV channels. So when on the right, you see the SCTI-35 being decoded by a log capture, and the orange section is a chunk of data that, when decoded, amongst other things, will reveal that same UID. So you're closing the loop from the schedule to the stream, and again, platforms can use that and call into ITV. Our APIs will obviously identify that UID, and then we could give context information back, either here's a start point, or here's another start point, or here's a list of start points, so you can direct your content wherever you need to do. And the actual BXF is very rich, so you see at the bottom and in purple, there's more data exposed that could be useful for a third party. So we expose the title, of course, and the transmission time, the date, and also the unique ITV ID, so we could, again, make more sense of it, and the channel, ITVB in this case. And that's it. Thank you very much.